Mr. Speaker, we're now in the midst of a full-scale national crisis. Incompetence, failure and intransigence from the Prime Minister and her government have brought us to this point. Parliament has rejected her deal. It's rejected no deal. The Prime Minister now has no plan. In an effort to break the deadlock, I've held meetings with members all across the House, and I'm having further meetings today to find a compromise that supports jobs and living standards. Tomorrow, I'm meeting EU Prime Ministers and officials in Brussels. This, Mr. Speaker, is a national crisis. Will the Prime Minister meet me today to discuss our proposals as a way forward to get out of this crisis?
To the right honourable gentleman, it's a bit rich him standing up and inviting me to meet him when for days and days he refused to meet me, and when for days and days he refused to meet me, and he then refused to allow the shadow Brexit Secretary to have a further meeting with the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. Of course, I'm always happy to meet members across this House to discuss the issue of Europe, but I do note that opposition party leaders, when they came out from the meeting with the Leader of the Opposition, made it clear that what they didn't want was Brexit. We should be delivering Brexit for the people of this country.
Jeremy Corbyn!
I'm not sure there was an answer to my question there, actually, Mr. Speaker. I wanted no deal taken off the table. The House has taken no deal off the table. It's time the Prime Minister took no deal off the table. Mr. Speaker, the CBI said the extension vote is a welcome dose of common sense. Put in place a new process, drop the red lines. Every MP must show leadership through compromise. Will the Prime Minister drop the red lines? Is she prepared to compromise to get through this crisis?
The right honourable gentleman talks about decisions that have been taken by this House. I'm sure it won't have passed you by, Mr. Speaker, that of course this House has voted on and rejected a second referendum. It has voted on and rejected no deal. It has voted on and rejected Labour's deal. It has voted on and rejected a customs union, and it has voted on and supported leaving with a deal. It's time this Parliament faced the consequences.
Jeremy Corbyn!
Mr. Speaker, the last time the Prime Minister tried her meaningful vote, she only managed 242 votes, slightly up on the previous attempt, but nevertheless a decisive rejection. Our plan received 296 votes, rather considerably more than that. Mr. Speaker, her government is in chaos. She's ignored the House, ignored trade unions, ignored businesses and ignored the concerns of communities all around the country. She told the House that the EU would only allow an extension of Article 50 if there was a clear purpose. She's travelling to Brussels tomorrow morning to meet the EU summit leaders. What is her clear purpose?
I think if the right honourable gentleman had listened to the answer I gave to the first question that was posed in PMQs, he would have heard that.
Well, it wasn't clear at all, Mr. Speaker, other than she's going to try again with what we'll now term MV3. Surely, after two big rejections by the House, she must have noticed there isn't much support for the deal that she negotiated. So we learned this morning, Mr. Speaker, that she's only going to ask for a short extension, which directly contradicts what the Cabinet Office Minister told the House, saying in the absence of a deal, seeking such a short and critically one-off extension would be downright reckless and completely at odds with the position this House adopted only last night. So who is downright reckless here, Mr. Speaker? The Prime Minister ploughing on with an unachievable, unsupported deal, or others in this House who want to achieve something serious and sensible to prevent the damage to the British economy, jobs and living standards all over this country?
The right honourable gentleman talks about trying to achieve something sensible. It's the right honourable gentleman who last week abstained on a vote of a second referendum, despite the fact that it's Labour Party policy, and then had the nerve to stand up in this House and say he reiterated their support for a second referendum. He has no idea what he wants on the future of this issue. He asks about a long extension. I'm opposed to a long extension. I don't want a long extension. Setting aside the issue that a long extension, would mean we would have to hold the European parliamentary elections, which I don't think is in anybody's interests. The outcome of a long extension would be endless hours and days of this House carrying on contemplating its navel on Europe and failing to address the issues that matter to our constituents. Their schools...
Order. The answer from the Prime Minister must be heard, and everybody else will be heard. The Prime Minister.
The outcome of a long extension would be this House spending yet more endless hours contemplating its navel on Europe and failing to address the issues that matter to our constituents, schools and hospitals and security and jobs. This House has indulged itself on Europe for too long.
Order. There's a lot of very noisy barracking. Order. The Prime Minister's reply will be heard, and colleagues know that I am happy for the exchanges to take place for as long as is necessary to ensure that they are orderly. The Prime Minister.
It's time for this House to determine that it will deliver on Brexit for the British people. That's what the British people deserve. They deserve better than this House has given them so far.
Mr. Speaker, to describe the parliamentary process as one of indulgence doesn't show much respect for the democratic process that sent us here in the first place. The House, Mr. Speaker, has twice rejected the Prime Minister's deal. She's trying to come back for another attempt on Monday. Further to your ruling last Monday, she's got to come up with something a bit different than she's come up with so far. So what significant changes will there be, either to the withdrawal agreement or the political declaration, that will even allow the Prime Minister to table it on Monday?
The right honourable gentleman talks about respect for democracy. Respect for democracy means that this House should deliver the Brexit that the British people voted for. And the right honourable gentleman now wants to disrespect democracy by holding a second referendum. It is not this government that is being disrespectful of the British people. It is the right honourable gentleman and his Labour Party.
Jeremy Corbyn!
The job of Parliament is to hold government to account, and the Prime Minister doesn't seem to understand that. When she was first defeated, she promised legally binding changes. I haven't seen those legally binding changes. All she's doing is running down the clock after a second heavy defeat. Today, Mr. Speaker, marks 1,000 days since the referendum. And this government has led the country and themselves into crisis, chaos and division. We are still legally due to leave the European Union in 9 days' time. Months of running down the clock and a concerted campaign of blackmail, bullying and bribery has failed to convince the House, or the country, that her deal is anything but a damaging national failure and should be rejected. They've run out of time. They've run out of ideas. People, Mr. Speaker, all over this country are anxious and frustrated with this government's utter inability to find a way through the crisis. If the Prime Minister cannot get changes to her deal, will she give the people a chance to reject the deal and change the government?
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman, I think he's actually just made the point that I was making in my previous answer to him, that he doesn't want to actually respect the vote that took place in the referendum. and 2016. We have a deal. We have a deal that keeps millions of livelihoods safe and secure. It protects the Union for the future. It means murderers and rapists on the run can be brought back quickly to face justice in this country. No deal won't do that. The deal is good for this country. It delivers Brexit and it should be supported.